Welcome to Empathy Stories, where we share heartfelt tales of resilience, love, and unexpected connections. Today, we bring you the enchanting story of Emily Carter and Ethan Belmont, a maid and a billionaire whose lives intertwine in ways neither could have imagined. Stay with us for this moving journey of love and healing. It was a crisp autumn morning when Emily Carter stepped out of her small apartment for her first day as a housekeeper at Belmont Estate. The sprawling mansion stood like a beacon of wealth and power in the picturesque Connecticut countryside, its towering gates both intimidating and awe-inspiring. Emily took a deep breath, trying to calm the nervous energy coursing through her. This wasn't the life she had envisioned for herself at 24. She had once dreamed of dazzling audiences as a professional dancer, touring the world with a company that shared her passion. But fate had other plans. 6 months earlier, Emily's world had come crashing down. During an important audition, an ankle injury had not only ended her chances for the role, but had also shattered her dreams. Unable to dance professionally and unwilling to burden her parents, who had already sacrificed so much for her, Emily had been forced to take a different path. The housekeeping job at Belmont Estate was far from the stage lights she had once aspired to, but it was a job nonetheless. She reminded herself of this fact as she walked through the grand iron gates and approached the mansion. Belmont Estate was breathtaking, a blend of old-world elegance and modern opulence. Its ivy-covered brick walls seemed to stretch endlessly, while the manicured gardens surrounding the property gave it an almost otherworldly charm. Emily couldn't help but pause to take it all in. For a moment, she imagined what it would be like to live in a place like this, to be surrounded by beauty every day. But her thoughts were interrupted by the sharp, businesslike voice of Mrs. Whitmore, the head housekeeper. "Miss Carter, we don't have time for daydreaming," Mrs. Whitmore said, her tone brisk. "Follow me. I'll show you to your quarters and go over your duties." Emily followed Mrs. Whitmore through the back entrance of the estate, where the hum of activity was palpable. Staff members bustled about, preparing for the return of the estate's elusive owner, Ethan Belmont. As they passed through the kitchen and into the main hall, Emily was struck by the sheer grandeur of the mansion's interior. Crystal chandeliers hung from vaulted ceilings, and polished marble floors reflected the sunlight streaming through oversized windows. "Mr. Belmont doesn't like disruptions," Mrs. Whitmore explained as they walked. "You'll primarily be responsible for cleaning the guest wing and assisting in the gardens. Keep your head down, do your work, and you'll do fine." Emily nodded, grateful for the guidance but still feeling a pang of nervousness. She had heard of Ethan Belmont before. Everyone in the area had. He was a reclusive billionaire, known for his sharp business acumen and his enigmatic presence. Rumors swirled about his past, about the tragedies that had shaped him into the man he was today. But Emily doubted she would ever cross paths with him. Men like Ethan Belmont didn't concern themselves with people like her. By the time her shift ended that evening, Emily was physically and emotionally drained. The day had been a blur of cleaning, organizing, and learning the ins and outs of the sprawling estate. Yet despite her exhaustion, she found herself unable to sleep. The quiet of her small room felt suffocating, and her thoughts were filled with memories of the life she had lost, the life she had worked so hard for, only to have it taken away. Unable to bear the restlessness, Emily decided to take a walk in the estate's gardens. The cool night air greeted her as she stepped outside, her breath visible in the moonlight. The gardens were even more enchanting than they had been during the day. The soft glow of the moon cast long shadows across the pathways, and the gentle rustling of the trees created a soothing symphony. Emily wandered aimlessly until she found herself near the fountain at the heart of the garden. The water sparkled under the moon's light, and for the first time in months, she felt a sense of peace. Standing there, Emily felt an urge she couldn't ignore. She slipped off her shoes and stepped onto the cool grass. Slowly, she began to move. At first, her movements were hesitant, her body stiff from months of inactivity. But as she let go of her fears and doubts, the rhythm returned. Her arms sliced through the air, her feet gliding over the earth. She twirled and leaped, her body finding its own music in the stillness of the night. For the first time since her injury, Emily felt free. She danced not for an audience, not for approval, but for herself. Unbeknownst to Emily, she wasn't alone. Ethan Belmont had returned to the estate late that evening and was standing on the terrace, a glass of whiskey in hand. The sight of the young woman dancing in the moonlit garden stopped him in his tracks. There was something about her movements that captivated him, something raw and unguarded, a vulnerability that mirrored emotions he had buried deep within himself. Ethan watched from the shadows, unable to look away. He had spent so many years isolating himself, focusing solely on his business empire, that he had almost forgotten what it felt like to connect with another person. Even from a distance, Emily's dance stirred something within him, a memory of what it meant to feel alive. As Emily finished her dance, her chest rising and falling with each breath, she turned her face toward the sky, the moonlight illuminating her features. Ethan lingered for a moment longer, then retreated into the shadows, his thoughts a swirl of curiosity and intrigue. For the first time in years, he felt a glimmer of something he couldn't quite name. And so, the stage was set for a connection neither of them could have anticipated, a chance encounter that would change their lives in ways they never imagined. The morning after her moonlit dance, Emily Carter felt a lingering sense of serenity as she prepared for the day ahead. The mansion seemed unusually lively, with staff bustling about in hushed whispers. News of Mr. Belmont's late-night return had spread, and the air was thick with anticipation. Emily, however, focused on her tasks, determined to keep her head down and avoid any unnecessary attention. After all, someone like Ethan Belmont wouldn't have a reason to notice a maid like her. But as she swept through the grand hallways, meticulously dusting the ornate furniture, she noticed Mrs. Whitmore approaching, her face unreadable. "Miss Carter," she began, her voice clipped. "Mr. Belmont would like to see you in his study." Emily froze, her mind racing. Had she done something wrong? Had someone seen her in the garden? With a sinking feeling in her stomach, she followed Mrs. Whitmore's brisk pace through the mansion. The study was a room she hadn't yet entered, a cavernous space with towering bookshelves and tall windows that bathed the room in golden light. Ethan Belmont stood by one of the windows, his silhouette framed by the morning sun. As she entered, his piercing blue eyes met hers, and for a moment, Emily felt exposed, as though he could see right through her. She tried to steady her nerves as Mrs. Whitmore left, closing the door behind her. "Miss Carter," Ethan began, his voice smooth, but carrying a weight of authority that made her stomach tighten. "I saw you last night." Emily's heart sank. She opened her mouth to apologize, but he held up a hand, stopping her. "There's no need to apologize. In fact, I wanted to thank you." "Thank me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan nodded, his expression softening. "It's been a long time since I've seen someone dance with such freedom and emotion." It was refreshing. Emily blinked, unsure of how to respond. I didn't mean to intrude," she stammered. I couldn't sleep. And Miss Carter," he interrupted gently. "You have nothing to explain." It was a gift to witness something so genuine. The tension in the room began to ease, though Emily still felt a strange nervousness under his gaze. "Do you still dance professionally?" he asked, his tone curious. She hesitated, the weight of her injury pressing down on her like it always did. "I used to," she admitted, "but I had to stop after an injury." Ethan studied her for a moment, his expression unreadable. "That's a shame," he said quietly. "But perhaps it's not the end." His words hung in the air, carrying a surprising sense of hope. Emily didn't know how to respond, but something in his tone resonated deeply with her. She saw a glimpse of the man behind the reclusive billionaire facade, a man who, like her, seemed to carry the weight of loss and longing. In the days that followed, Emily couldn't help but notice Ethan's presence more and more. He began to appear in places she worked: the garden, the hallways, even the kitchen. At first, she thought it was mere coincidence, but over time, it became clear that he sought her out intentionally. He would engage her in conversation, asking her about her favorite books, her favorite music, and the places she dreamed of visiting. Though she was hesitant at first, Emily found herself opening up to him. There was a gentleness in the way he listened, a sincerity that put her at ease. He never pried, never pushed her to reveal more than she was comfortable with. But his quiet curiosity made her feel seen in a way she hadn't in a long time. One afternoon, as she worked in the garden, Ethan approached her with a watering can in hand. "Mind if I join you?" he asked, a rare smile tugging at his lips. Emily was taken aback, but nodded. Together, they worked in companionable silence, planting a row of vibrant roses. Their hands brushed occasionally as they moved, and though neither of them acknowledged it, the brief touches sent a warmth through Emily that she couldn't ignore. Over time, their conversations grew deeper. Ethan spoke of his parents, of the loneliness that had consumed him after their deaths. He admitted that he had buried himself in work to escape the pain, but now he wondered if he had lost something vital in the process. Emily, in turn, shared stories of her childhood, of her love for dance and the dreams she had once held so tightly. One evening, as Emily brought tea to Ethan's study, he surprised her with a question. "Would you dance for me again?" he asked, his tone hesitant, almost vulnerable. Emily hesitated, unsure if she could recapture the freedom she had felt in the garden that night. But the earnestness in his expression compelled her to agree. They moved to the mansion's empty ballroom, its polished floors reflecting the soft glow of the chandelier above. Ethan put on a slow waltz, and as the music filled the space, Emily began to dance. Her movements were tentative at first, but as the rhythm took over, she let herself go. Ethan watched, his gaze filled with something she couldn't quite name, admiration, perhaps, or something deeper. When the music ended, Ethan stepped forward and offered her his hand. "May I?" he asked softly. Emily nodded, her heart racing as he led her in a simple waltz. His hand was firm, yet gentle on her waist, and as they moved together, she felt a connection she hadn't expected, a quiet understanding that neither of them put into words. As the days turned into weeks, the bond between them deepened. Their conversations became more intimate, their shared moments more frequent. Emily found herself looking forward to his presence, to the way he made her feel valued, understood, and, perhaps most importantly, alive. Ethan, too, felt a shift within himself. For years, he had built walls around his heart, convinced that vulnerability was a weakness he couldn't afford. But Emily's warmth, her resilience, and her quiet strength began to dismantle those walls. Piece by piece, in their shared moments, both of them found something they hadn't realized they were searching for, a sense of belonging. The weeks that followed brought changes to Belmont Estate that even the staff couldn't ignore. Ethan Belmont, once a man known for his cold demeanor and distant nature, seemed to transform. He smiled more, his steps lighter as he moved through the grand halls. And Emily Carter, the once quiet maid, seemed to bloom in his company. Her laughter, once a rarity, echoed through the estate, filling its vast spaces with warmth. For Emily, the connection she had formed with Ethan felt like a dream, one she wasn't entirely sure she should trust. She had spent so long guarding her heart, afraid to let anyone see the vulnerability beneath her resilience. But with Ethan, it was different. He had seen her at her lowest, witnessed her dancing alone in the garden, and instead of judgment, he had shown her kindness. It was as if he had looked past her circumstances and seen the person she truly was. One evening, Ethan invited Emily to dinner in the mansion's grand dining room. It was a quiet affair, just the two of them, with candles flickering between them and the sound of soft music playing in the background. Emily felt out of place at first, unsure of how to navigate the intimacy of the moment. But as the conversation flowed, she began to relax. Ethan wasn't the intimidating billionaire she had imagined. He was simply a man who had faced his own share of heartbreak and loss. As they talked, Ethan opened up about his parents, revealing a side of himself he rarely showed. "They were everything to me," he admitted, his voice heavy with emotion. "When I lost them, I threw myself into work. It was the only way I knew how to cope. But now, I see how much of life I've missed because of it." Emily listened intently, her empathy genuine. She understood what it was like to lose something you loved, to feel like a part of yourself had been taken away. "I know what that's like," she said softly. "When I lost aunts, it felt like I lost a part of myself. But being here, it's reminded me that maybe there's still a way to hold on to the things we love, even if it looks different than we imagined." Her words struck a chord in Ethan. For so long, he had believed that his wealth and success could shield him from the pain of his past. But Emily's presence had shown him otherwise. She had brought a light into his life that he hadn't realized he needed. And in her, he saw a reflection of his own struggles and hopes. One evening, as they stood in the garden under a canopy of stars, Ethan took Emily's hand in his. "Emily," he said, his voice low and filled with emotion, "you've brought something back into my life that I thought I'd lost forever. You've shown me that it's possible to feel again, to dream again. I don't want this to end." Emily's heart raced as she looked up at him, her eyes shimmering. "You've done the same for me," she replied, her voice trembling with emotion. "I didn't think I'd ever find a place where I belonged again. But here, with you, I feel like I've found it." Ethan leaned his forehead against hers, his voice barely a whisper. "Stay with me, not just in this house, but in my life." Tears welled in Emily's eyes as she nodded. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking. "Yes, I'll stay." In the weeks that followed, their relationship deepened. Ethan began inviting Emily to join him for dinners more often, their conversations stretching late into the night. He listened as she shared her dreams of teaching dance to children, of finding a way to keep her passion alive despite her injury. And one evening, he made her a promise. "We'll make it happen," he said, his voice earnest. "You deserve to have your dreams, Emily, and I want to help you make them real." His words filled her with a sense of hope she hadn't felt in years. Together, they began planning ways to bring her vision to life. Ethan offered to fund a dance school, a place where Emily could teach children the art she loved so dearly. The idea filled her with excitement, and for the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to dream. Their love wasn't without its challenges. The staff whispered about the relationship between the billionaire and the maid, and Emily couldn't help but feel the weight of their judgment. But Ethan stood by her side, unwavering in his commitment to her. "Let them talk," he said one evening as they walked hand in hand through the garden. "What matters is us." Slowly, the whispers died down, replaced by a quiet admiration for the way Ethan and Emily brought out the best in each other. Ethan's icy exterior melted away, replaced by a warmth that radiated through the estate. And Emily, once a quiet presence, seemed to shine with a newfound confidence and joy. One summer evening, as they stood together in the garden, Ethan pulled Emily close. "You've changed my life," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You've shown me that love isn't about status or appearances. It's about finding someone who sees you for who you truly are." Emily smiled, her heart full. "And you've shown me that it's okay to dream again." Their journey wasn't perfect, but it was theirs, a love built on understanding, healing, and the shared belief that together, they could face whatever challenges lay ahead. In the moonlit garden of Belmont Estate, they found not just love, but a sense of belonging, proving that even in the most unexpected places, the heart can find its way home. Thank you for joining us on this touching journey at Empathy Stories. Emily and Ethan's story reminds us that love can bloom in the most unexpected places, offering hope and healing to those who dare to open their hearts. If their journey inspired you, please like, share, and subscribe for more stories of connection and transformation. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and stay tuned for our next tale. Together, let's celebrate the power of empathy and understanding. See you next time.